and I jumped in the doorway and flattened myself, and he passed. And but I dropped the bottle. It broke, and it splat. The raw essence, you can't imagine how strong that stuff is. All over my pants at the bottom, up here. I got on a bus going back to the air base from Tunis, and the guys say, "Oh, you're cute, Sarge. We like you, Sarge." You know, stuff like that. And it was embarrassing, and you couldn't wash the stuff off. I mean, I showered and showered. But you remember these things; they stick in your mind. This Murphy guy. Remember, I told you he was crazy. Well, nobody could imagine how crazy he was. You know, when you go out to a plane, before you go off, you're there. You wake up at 3 in the morning, you eat breakfast. Then they go to briefing, and after briefing, you got to check your guns and I had to run up the engines and see. A Jeep would come by with his PFC, who would have a bag of 10 sandwiches of either bologna or whatever they had, because you had to eat some lunch coming home. And they'd give them out. And I remember Murphy stands there. He's an officer. He's a lieutenant. And he says to this PFC, "I want another bag." He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. We're only allowed to give one bag to a..." He says, we carried 45s in our shoulder holster, because in case we got shot down, we might have to shoot animals or something to eat, you know, to stay alive. He pulls out his gun and points it right at him and says, "You give me another bag." And that guy gave him a bag, jumped in his Jeep, and he tore off like hell down the airfield. And Murphy, he did something which man could be court-martialed for, but he didn't care. He was shot down 3 times. There was a part of Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia had 3 large political groups. They had the Tito's partisans, who were with us. They'd risk their lives to get us back to anywhere if our men bailed out over their territory. They'd do anything to get us back. They were wonderful to us. And then they had Mikhailovich. It's according to what he ate for breakfast that day. He could turn you over to the Germans or he could turn you over to the Americans. And then they had the Ustachis. Now the Ustachis were, what do you call that group of people? We're having trouble with today with them.
Serbian.
Yeah, but they were, what? Mohammedans, Muslims, yeah, Muslims. They were trained by the Gestapo in torture methods, and if they got our men, they used to torture them to death. And the things we heard about were so horrible, what they did to our men who bailed out over that part of Yugoslavia where the Ustachi, in English I think they pronounce it Eustachians, Ustachis were. And we were carrying our bombs back. See, if you get a cloudy day sometimes, you have to carry your bombs back to your base. Or we would never really carry them back. We'd drop them in the Adriatic Sea safe, you know what I mean? But this is not safe landing with a bomb load. So we're flying over, and I don't remember the name of the city. It was the Ustachi capital. And I hear over VHF, Murphy's calls Able Lead. Able Lead is the colonel who leads the group, and says, "Sir, I'd like permission to drop my bombs over that Ustachi capital." And the colonel says, "Negative, no." He called again. Fly over there, and his bomb bay doors open up, and his bombs go. And the colonel is livid with rage. He's screaming over there, and he said, "What happened?" He says, "Sorry, sir, I don't know. My salvo switch. Something happened to the salvo switch." Salvo switch is an emergency. You push the switch, and it empties your bombs if you're going to, you know, have an accident or something. He says, "I don't know. Our salvo switch broke, and it went out." Nothing was ever done to him. We speak about security. You have civilian employees at these airfields. Now, they're sweeping floors and all. During briefing, when, you know, they're giving us the mission of the day, and they're telling what they're going to do, these guys are sweeping the floors, collecting the dust and all. I figure, what kind of security is this? They must be out of their minds, you know, everybody. Nobody seemed to care. And yet, when we're eating breakfast, we hear, what was her name, Axis Sally, Berlin Sally, I don't know. An American who turned over, used to be on the radio. And she'd say, "Hello, boys of the 97th. I understand you're going to hit the oil refineries again today." So now I know how she knew. She'd say, "Have a good time." She says, "While you're here, your wives and girlfriends are home having a good time with defense workers." She'd always say that. She said, she said, if you were smart, you land here. And then she'd mention to lieutenants, Lieutenant, I'm having dinner with Lieutenant so-and-so who bailed out and gave himself up. And he's having a good life as a prisoner of war here. You know, what? Sally, was it? Axis Sally. I forget whether it was Berlin Sally, Axis Sally. And actually, they played good music, though. You know, American music. Yeah. Well, I'm going to stop now, and you can, gentlemen will.
As we've done in the past, if you have a question, raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone back.
Thank you.
Very good. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, that's when I first got my wings, and
I'd like to know what happened to the girlfriend that you met in California who came to L.A. to see you. Did you you never finished that story?
I never saw her again. We went out in Las Vegas, and she was very nice, but I never got back to California.
Would your wife believe that?
What?
What was your submission?
Excuse me, let's not ask a question. We have the mic back here.
Yeah.
The Jewish leaders urged that the concentration be bombed. The Air Force asked they could not risk air crews to do that unessential target. But didn't the 15th Air Force fly over Auschwitz and many of those other deep penetration targets many times? And could you have done that? Do you know?
I don't know.
All right.
I don't know the answer to that.
I think that has to be handled by people that were in charge of us at that time. We did what we were told. Here's another question.
Thank you, Stanley Hoffman, for a wonderful, highly invigorating, humorous, informative talk.
Well, I learned.
Go ahead.
I learned, and this was a good lesson, from a lot of things that happened to me in this lifetime. Right now, I'm 2 years older than God, and you know, but at that time, I learned that unless you keep your sense of humor, and unless you see humor in things, you're going to be devastated in this world. And I taught English for 35 years at Northeast High and Germantown High, and I learned one thing. In fact, I was a disciplinarian at Germantown High for 6 years, and I learned one thing there. Without humor, with humor, you can get over so much. You can get over so much. I remember the kids at the school. We had the gang wars in those days when I was at Germantown. And I'd get a kid in, and they'd be cursing, and they'd get you angry. I'm a human being. And then I'd say, yeah, you can't get angry, to myself. You can't get angry. And I'd look them in the eye and say, shut up and drink your beer. And they'd laugh, and I would laugh, and things would cool off, you know, things like that. And that's what you do. A lot of humor.
Sure. Yes. Murphy and many of the men and yourself also would be included in Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. You've got a book in you.
Yeah.
How you did?
You want to know something interesting? My son, maybe a year ago, 2 years, I don't know, said, Dad, you flew with the 97th? I said, yeah. He says, there's an organization called the 97th Reunion Organization out in, what did I tell you a state that was? Montana. I made a phone call, and I talked to one of the officers of the group, and I joined it, of course, and I got in touch with my pilot, hey, who's that handsome guy? Look how I changed. Pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier. I couldn't speak to Pianzio. He was in a hospital. And who else? Oh, and my ball turret gunner. Yeah, here they are now. They met in California. I couldn't be with them. I couldn't be with them, and frankly, I don't know. Oh, here's Risvet. What he does, he invented a lot of, you know, the guy that got screwed up everything. Oh, I never finished that story. He was in a plane, and at the end of a mission, when we got over the Adriatic Sea in safe territory, I would have to go through with a clipboard and check all the damage, the holes in the, you know, anything that was shot up in the plane, so the ground crew could work on it. And he's staying by his waist guns, and he was broad grin on his face. He came out of it alive, you know. And he says, boy, I pity those poor guys in the last mission. There was a huge hole in the side of the plane where a shell came in and went out through the other side. And I was writing it up, you know, to have that hole fixed. He says, look at those poor guys. Look what they had to go through. And I say, Vic, that happened now in this mission. And he started to cry like a baby. He cried like a baby. He was so scared. He said, that happened now? I can't believe it. I was speaking to him on the phone 2 weeks ago, and he says, I remember that time? But because sometimes he would, I remember he was so afraid of flying, because he never figured that they're going to shoot back at him. And I remember he used to be on his knees right beside there in the gun, and he had a twin sister who was a nun, and he was counting rosary beads, and he would be down there and crying like an infant. Please, I'm too young to die. I'm too young to die. And what? Yeah, where he came out of it all right, and he made a good living out of it, because I never thought he had that mechanical skill to be an inventor. He invented these counting machines they use at the casinos, one of the brands, I don't know if not all of them, that they give you change with, and he invented, that's what he still works at. He didn't give it up. He married a Southern girl, and he lives in Tennessee. And he was, yeah, that's
Okay,
it.
one more question of Stanley.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
I was curious to how many missions you flew in Italy.
I flew 20 missions. Well, we didn't have missions. I want to tell you the difference. In a mission, as long as you fly over enemy territory, they count it as a mission. But in a sortie, you have to fly over your target for it to be counted as a mission. Right over the target, your proposed target, for it to be counted as a mission. Now, we went on many missions where we turned back before reaching the target because cloud coverage, and we just didn't get up to it, or other reasons. But so I had 20, and then the war was over. And that night, when the war was over, they celebrated. You know, we went there. They were saving the real rare wines in our squadron club, and they broke them out, and everybody was drunk. And the guys went out to the plains and turned the machine gun skyward, and the sky was just filled with tracers. But the tracers landed, and they caught onto our oil supply, and the whole oil area was burning up. But everybody was too drunk to care. They were laughing, and they had a bucket brigade where we were singing and passing buckets to put out the fire.
Stanley,
Yeah.
thank you very much.